Cheap midfielders, medium price, and the expensive ones. They're usually the highest scoring position in FPL, so it's important we pick the right ones. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan, and today we're going to be doing a tier list for the midfielders for the new FPL season with some extra information that may change the way you think. Let's get going. Okay guys, so if you don't know how my tier list videos work, we are going to be ranking a bunch of FPL players based on how good they are as FPL assets for the new season, guys. We're going to be going through these 5 categories, top picks. There's no must-buys or essential players in this tier list because honestly, I don't think there's a single midfielder that is absolutely must-buy, and there's different ways to play your midfield game this year, so there is no essentials, but we do have some top picks. We have great picks. We have solid options who are going to be very reliable for you. We've got those risky picks that aren't high risk, high reward. They are just high risk, which is not always a good thing. And then we've got the straight up avoids players that I would not be looking to touch for the new season for your game week 1 teams anyway. There's always time to change our minds later on in the season. So we're going to go through the 25 most popular midfield picks in FPL right now. And at the end of the video, we're going to add 5 more spicy, differential, low-owned picks that people aren't talking about enough. So we're going to go through some hidden gem midfielders that I think are worth a mention at the end of the video. But I want to get going straight away, guys, because we have got lots of players to go through. And we're going to start off with Callum Hudson-Odoi, who for me is a risky pick. And at 5.5 million, you can kind of understand why. Now, obviously, Nottingham Forest have some really good fixtures to start off the season. But Hudson-Odoi, despite scoring 8 goals last season, he only got 2.65 expected goals all season. So that's a huge, massive overperformance, and I'm not sure he can replicate that. Another risky pick is going to be Declan Rice at 6.5 million. He did perform quite well in FPL terms last year, scoring a couple of goals, obviously a corner taker by the end of the season as well, which is a very useful avenue to get FPL points. And Arsenal are a top side, so Rice will be involved, but I still think it's a little risky, and there's maybe some better 6.5 million midfielders we can go for. Next up, Maddison's going to be another risky one. I do think he is maybe being underappreciated a little bit, but what we know about Maddison is that he's a very streaky player, and it's important to own him when he is in one of his hot streaks. He ended last season very much out of a hot streak, so I'm not sure I'd want to go for him straight away. Maybe more of a wait and see player, give him a couple of weeks to see how he gets on, but you could take a risk early on. Next up, Rodgers. Morgan Rodgers is a 5 million midfielder for Aston Villa. He had a great end to last season coming into the main lineup for Villa. Great pre-season so far as well, and genuinely could start regularly now that Diaby has left the club. So Rodgers at 5 million is probably the best 5 million pick in the game. Now, are you going to want to play him every single game week? Maybe not, because I don't think he's completely safe. But at 5 million, he is as solid as you can get. If you want to go for a cheap guy, rotate him in and out of your starting 11. I think he does the job just perfectly. Next up, we've got another player, and it's going to be Luis Diaz. And I think I would debatably put him in the avoid category, but I am going to bump him up into risky because I do appreciate if you get this right, it can potentially go well. The problem with Diaz is that he's a huge minutes risk. And looking at, Jota, Darwin, Gakpo, all going to be competing for the left wing and striker position. So we've got 4 Liverpool players and only 2 positions available, assuming that Salah is going to be playing on the right. Well, Diaz is probably looking like the least likely player to get minutes, particularly as he can only play in the left wing position, and all of the other guys can potentially play at left wing or at striker. A lot of people saying that Gakpo is going to start the season for Liverpool at left wing, and if that's the case, Luis Diaz might have his minutes limited. And the problem is with these Liverpool midfielders, attackers, is that even if they start in game week 1, it doesn't mean they're going to start in game week 2, 3, 4, 5, or, for the rest of the season, really. Luis Diaz will get some minutes this year, but he is super, super risky, and I wouldn't want to, take a bet that he is going to start regularly enough to make him worth his price tag. So let's move on to Kevin De Bruyne, who is certainly a risk as well. So we're going to put him in the risky category here. He's going to be given some time off at the start of the season, according to Pep Guardiola. Although, to be fair, Belgium didn't go super, super far in the Euros. So he may return a little bit earlier than maybe some English and Spanish players in the Premier League. But still, it's looking like De Bruyne is going to be reintroduced at some point in game week 1 or game week 2. He's not back training yet at the club. So Therefore, there is some debate as to how many minutes you're going to get out of him game week 1, game week 2. So probably not worth taking that risk. He is in the risky category for a very good reason. Another risky player, again, is going to be Mbermo. And it's not because I don't like him as a pick. I actually rather do like him as a pick, but still risky for me. The problem is with Mbermo is that he's got bad fixtures. Palace, that's a tough fixture. Then Liverpool, Southampton, which is pretty good. But then after that, Man City, Spurs. And Mbermo got so many of his points last season through taking penalties. And Tony is still at the club. And if Tony is still at the club, then Tony's going to be taking penalties, not Mbermo. And that's really going to damage his points potential for the new season. I don't know if Tony is going to leave or not. Obviously, the new striker that Brentford have signed has recently got injured. So that might actually mean Tony stays, keeps the penalties, and Mbermo might kind of fade into obscurity as an FPL pick, which is something I'm a little worried about. Rashford is going to go in the avoid, our first avoid of the video. He fell out of favour at the end of last season, so his minutes are not guaranteed. And I think we need to see something from Rashford before we start considering him. I don't think he's a player you go for in game week 1. We wait and see. We assess, can he get back to form? Can he get back to the top of his game? And can he start getting regular minutes again? If so, fantastic. Let's talk about Rashford again. But now is not the time for that. Jared Bowen, I think, is a tentative avoid, and I think that's mostly because of his fixtures. There is potential that you could get something out of him. You know, when we're looking at one of the best players at his club, arguably the best player at West Ham, is there a chance that he does get attacking returns, even in some of these tougher games? By the way, the games are Aston Villa, Palace, Man City, Fulham, and Chelsea to open up the season. It's really not great, but he's a great player. Can he do it? I don't know. I think it's a little risky, and I think at 7.5 million, I would not be willing to invest that amount of money in a run of fixtures that is quite that bad. But that's just my opinion. I think he's risky at best. Next up, Morgan Gibbs-White. I think he's a solid pick, to be fair. Gibbs-White, he is obviously a penalty taker. He has got really good fixtures, as we mentioned, for Forest, like Hudson-Odoi. So we've got Bournemouth, Southampton, and Wolves. We've got 5 goals and 12 assists last season for Gibbs-White, and he actually tracked around the same as his underlying numbers as well. So it's not a huge overperformance like Hudson-Odoi. So I think spending that extra million to go from Hudson-Odoi to Gibbs-White, if you do want a Nottingham Forest midfielder, is very much going to be worth it. He's definitely a solid 6.5, unlike Rodri, who I think is risky. Kind of similar situation to Rice, really, when you're having those slightly deeper midfielders who obviously had a great season last season for FPL, 8 goals and 10 assists actually for Rodri last year. My issue with Rodri is that he kind of doubled his expected goals, he doubled his expected assists. Big overperformance. Can he replicate it? Maybe, but that's the risk, isn't it? Next up, another avoid. It's going to be Kobe Mainu. And yeah, Manchester United fans, you're not going to be happy with me. Don't worry, we've got some more Manchester United players later on in the video who are going to be a little higher up. But the problem with Mainu is he's a fantastic player, but he's just not great for FPL because he is a little bit deeper in a team that doesn't score as many goals as a Man City or Arsenal, whereas Rodri and Rice can maybe chip in because their team are scoring more goals. Manchester United, not quite the same situation. And Mainu ended up with 3 goals and 1 assist in 24 starts. That's kind of, you know, you're looking at getting an attacking return every 5 or 6 games. That's not really good enough for FPL. And there are a few other 5.5 million midfielders that have a little bit more attacking potential than Mainu. So great player, bags of potential in real life football, but I'm not sure he is quite the FPL pick that we're looking for quite yet. Sorry about that, guys. Next up, Son. I think Son's going to go in the great pick category. 17 goals, 10 assists last season for Son. He only scored 1 penalty goal during that as well. So scored 17 goals with only 1 penalty. That is really, really impressive stuff. He's a career overperformer. So even if he is overperforming his expected data, he's done that for his entire career because he is such an elite finisher. We've got Son with a decent fixture against Leicester to start off. After that, Everton a little tough. Newcastle away could be tough. Arsenal is a tough fixture on paper, but is a fixture that Son thrives in. And I think he is definitely a reliable player who can score in any game. So yeah, maybe not the Everton game. That's probably going to be tough for Son. But outside of that, I think Son could do well against Leicester, Newcastle, and even Arsenal in the opening 4. So I think he's a great pick. Yeah, 10 million would be well spent with him. A quick break in play, guys, to remind you to subscribe and to like as well. If this video gets 1,000 likes, we will drop the Defenders tier list video next, but only if you guys want it. So let me know. Next up, Kudus. He is not going to go as low as Bowen. I think he's got to go as a little higher than Bowen, and that's mostly because he is 1 million cheaper. And if you're spending a little bit less money on difficult fixtures, I think it's a little more acceptable. Obviously, Kudus is a bargain pricer at 6.5, phenomenal player, and I think he's going to have a really good season, but those fixtures are not great. Harry Winks, solid. If you're looking for a 4.5 million midfielder to just sit on your bench, then Harry Winks is the perfect guy for it, because he is just going to score you 2 points, maybe 3 points every single game week, and if you need an emergency midfielder, you have an injury, a red card, you just want to have Winks get you a couple of points just for 1 game week only, then he's going to be able to resolve that situation for you. But that is his role. You know, this is not a player you want to have in your starting lineup really ever. You know, he doesn't score enough, he doesn't get enough assists. Not great for FPL. Garnacho looks solid. I like the look of Garnacho. I think 6.5 million is a really, really nice price for him. The problem with Garnacho, I guess, as an FPL asset is he's very hit or miss. He can either get a huge score and then he'll, you know, disappear and won't score any goals for a few weeks, really. But he is capable of those huge scores. He's an improving player as well, which I like. And Fulham, Brighton, Liverpool, Southampton, Crystal Palace, they're okay fixtures. They're not amazing fixtures, but they're okay. You can definitely get something out of that. Bruno Fernandes is definitely at least as solid. I'm actually going to drop him into the great pick category because I think at 8.5 million, you've got a nailed-on penalty taker, set-piece taker, reliable guy who is the hub and talisman of his team. There's very little that can go wrong when you pick Bruno Fernandes. So I like this pick a lot. Next up, Nkunku, and he's going to be my first player in the top pick category for me today. And we're going to try and really limit the players in the top pick category. But Nkunku, for me, at 6.5 is a massive standout player. He is so underpriced. He could play as a striker despite being listed as a midfielder. He's got really high praise from the new manager, Maresca, and he's been putting in some top performances in pre-season. So he could be a game-breaking player if he remains injury-free. Now, a lot of people are not going to like the fact that he has been injured in the past, but you know, are you having the same energy with Isak or, you know, Diogo Jota or, you know, Eze? Are you having the same energy with those players with their injury records? Probably not, right? Because you know that when you grab a really high potential player when they are not injured, then you're going to get points. And if he does get injured somewhere down the line, whether that's in 1 week or 6 months from now, well, that's what transfers are for in FPL. And the important thing is we are picking up points in the meantime. Getting a player of Nkunku's quality playing out of position at 6.5 million, one of the top attacks in the Premier League in Chelsea, this is an unreal bargain. So I think he is genuinely a top pick, and I will not have any slander. If you are fearful of injuries, then that is a playing style thing. If you don't like doing that, you want to play safer with injury risk players, then, you know, go for it. But I don't expect to see Isak in your team either. And obviously, he is an unreal FPL asset. Right, next up, we've got to move on. Odegaard, solid. Yeah, probably not as good as some of these other picks. 8 goals and 11 assists. I think that is just kind of meh for 8.5 million. For reference, by the way, guys, that's the same amount of goals and only 1 more assist than Rodri last season, and he's 8.5 million. But Odegaard does provide reliable minutes and some set pieces as well. Playing for a top team, he is a solid pick. But he is no more than that, unfortunately. Unlike his teammate Saka, who I am so tempted to put in the top pick category because I really, really do like the look of this pick. I'm going to put him in there. I'm doing it. 16 goals, 12 assists last season. That is much better than Odegaard. Penalty taker, nailed on, going to play every game. I think there was some fear that Saka wouldn't start the new season regularly because of playing at the Euros. But you know, Arteta has already spoken. He's back in training. He's ready to go. And he's going to be playing right from the off. So no concerns about that one anymore, which is really, really good to see. If Arsenal have a talisman, it is Saka. And I do quite like the look of Arsenal's opening fixtures as well. I think they look bad on paper, but actually they're really nice. So Wolves are nowhere near as good defensively as they have been historically. So that's a really nice fixture in Game Week 1. But then we've got the likes of Aston Villa in Game Week 2, who really, really were poor defensively last season. Can they improve? Not sure. We'll see. But Arsenal are going to have opportunities against them. We know that for sure. Brighton is the next fixture at home, which is, again, pretty decent fixture. And then Spurs, who we know are a weak defence, strong attack. So if you are an attacking player for Arsenal, you are going to have some opportunities against the likes of Aston Villa and Spurs. Defenders, I would be a little bit more worried for Arsenal against those teams. But I like this. Saka, for me, is a top pick and one of the first top players to really consider when building your team. If you can't quite afford him because of other players you're going for, then that's a reason to remove Saka. That's why nobody is a must-have in this tier list today. But still, top pick. Absolute top pick. Foden, however, is not. Down into the risky category, yeah. Sadly for Foden, he has to drop down next to De Bruyne because, once again, Pep Guardiola has said that a lot of his players who played at the Euros are going to be rested, reintegrated, not even back in training. Foden is not even going to be on the bench in the Community Shield, for example, and he's going to be slowly introduced in Game Week 1 and Game Week 2. And Game Week 2, by the way, guys, is that Ipswich Town game at home. And if we haven't even got Foden to guaranteed start in Game Week 2, then that is problematic. Game Week 1, of course, is against Chelsea as well, which isn't a bad fixture, but is Foden even going to start that game? Probably not. We're looking at probably a bench appearance in Game Week 1. Game Week 2, we might see him substituted off early, and it won't be till Game Week 3 until we start seeing regular minutes from Foden. So Foden is definitely a player we will be looking at eventually, but for our Game Week 1 squad, I think it's a little bit too risky for me. So he's got to drop down there into that category. Next up, we've got some more really good picks here. Eberechi Eze is our next pick. He's got to go in the great pick category. 15 goals, 5 assists in 24 starts last season. Really, really nice. On all set pieces. Going to be on penalties as well. Really nice value for money and a decent run of fixtures for Palace to start the season off. So ticking a lot of boxes here. Gordon is another great pick. In my opinion, 11 goals, 16 assists last season. By the way, he did massively overperform on his assists, but the 11 goals is still very impressive. He could be on set pieces if Trippier leaves, and we've got Southampton as the first fixture, then Bournemouth, Spurs, and Wolves. So a reasonably good run of fixtures there for Newcastle to start the season. So yeah, like Gordon a lot. Definitely a player to consider at 7.5 million. Now, our next player is the second most popular midfielder in FPL at time of recording, and his name is Mo Salah, and he is obviously a top pick. The only reason you wouldn't pick Salah is for financial reasons. If you've got Haaland in your team, assuming that he is available for Game Week 1, then you might not be able to afford Salah and have a balanced team. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. That's going to be down to you guys. So I don't think Salah is absolutely essential, but he is the best midfielder in the game for the new season. Amazing fixtures for Liverpool, nailed on, penalty taker. We've got Ipswich, Brentford, Man United, Forest, Bournemouth, and Wolves. You can't do too much better than that. We've got the standout captain option for Game Week 1 against Ipswich. He is a known quantity. You know exactly what you're going to get. Very reliable. He's doing everything for us in FPL. Everything but the price is great for Salah, right? And 12.5 is a fair price for him, but he's not going to be affordable for everyone. Which leaves us with our number 1 most popular midfielder for the new season, and then we can finally do our hidden gems, and that's going to be Cole Palmer. Now, where do we put Cole Palmer? I think great pick. I think we'll put him in the great pick category. I think value for money, he maybe drops below Eze and Gordon. My issue with Palmer is that I'm not sure what to expect for the new season, because last season is the only data we have for him, really. And in the new season, he is going to be playing under a completely different manager in a completely different system. And we already know from the manager Maresca's comments that he's going to be playing a very different role this year. He's going to be playing more centrally. The opening fixtures I don't think are as good as they look. Man City is, obviously a bad fixture in Game Week 1. Wolves, decent, like the Wolves fixture in Game Week 2. But then Crystal Palace and Bournemouth away. I don't know if I love those fixtures. But Palmer, we know what he did last season. He's the talisman. He's on penalties. He's on set pieces. He's always going to be at least a great pick. But is he a player who you might want to get a little bit more information on before spending 10.5 million? For some people, they will want to get a little bit more information. For other people, they'll be ready to go with him right now. And if you're ready to go with him, great, go for him. But I can't put him any higher than great pick. He is not quite a top pick until we know how well he does under Maresca, what role he has under Maresca, and hopefully to get some of these tough fixtures out the way as well. And then we're going to be all aboard the Palmer train, believe it. Right, finally. Few hidden gems to go through with you quickly, guys. These players are not being spoken about enough. First of all, Bailey. I think Bailey could even be a great pick. Really like the look of Bailey. 10 goals and 11 assists despite only starting 22 times for Aston Villa last year. That is amazing. He pretty much played himself into the team last season. And like I said, Diaby has left, which means Bailey is more of a first choice player than ever before. And he's only 6.5 million. Really like the look of this one. Andreas is our next pick. I think he is potentially a little risky, but there's got to be some appeal for 5.5. And he's probably my favourite 5.5 million midfielder. He is obviously a player with great fixtures. Man United, Leicester, Ipswich, West Ham, and then Newcastle. He's on penalties, set pieces. He is nailed on. But only 3 goals and 9 assists last season, despite being on all of those set pieces. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, he can have amazing fixtures. But if he, you know, is not a top level player, then it doesn't matter how good your fixtures are. You're not necessarily going to be able to grab, you know, a hat-trick every game. And considering he only scored 3 goals all of last season, I'd be surprised if he gets any hat-tricks at all. But yeah, he's a little bit risky. I think I would put maybe a Smith Rowe in a similar position, because I know you guys are going to ask about Smith Rowe, around the risky area. Great fixtures, but we're not really sure what we're going to get from them. Next up, Diogo Jota. And he's obviously a super high risk player, but the reward is high. And I think that's the difference with a Diogo Jota. High risk, but also high reward. Unlike some of the other risky picks, which don't really offer you too much in ways of reward. But I'm going to put him in solid. I know that's probably the wrong word to use for him. I think because he's somewhere between a great pick and risky, he could go either way. I'm just going to put him in the middle there. So yeah, Jota, mini Salah when fit. Basically, 10 goals, 7 assists, despite only 14 starts. That's incredible. He can do well from the bench as well, even if he doesn't start games. I think he's a really nice pick. Maybe we need a bit more information before putting him any higher on this tier list. Another solid pick is for sure Szoboszlai. Not got quite the explosivity of a Diogo Jota, but I think he could be fairly reliable playing in a new position under Slot in an attacking midfield position. It's going to be a very different season for him. I think there's some huge potential there. And finally, Brennan Johnson, I think, is one of the most underrated players in FPL for the new year. I don't know why people aren't talking about him more often. Really underrated. 5 goals, 12 assists last season. Massively underperforming his XG. He actually had over 10 expected goals last season, I believe. So yeah, he is getting opportunities to score. He has kind of become first choice in the right wing position for Spurs, because Spurs don't really, or under Postecoglou, don't really like Kulusevski in that right wing position. In fact, Kulusevski looking more likely to start as a central striker than he is at right wing, which does really improve the prospects for Johnson. Yeah, so I think this could be a really nice one. Opening fixture against Leicester. Yeah, could be a really, really interesting one. But those are all of the players that I'm going to be rating today. Guys, let me know what you think. Have we got this tier list in roughly the right order? Or is there any one you really disagree with on this one? Could we maybe actually drop a few more players down into the avoid? Have I been maybe a little bit too generous on some of these players potentially? You know, like Bowen and Luis Diaz. Could we drop them in down there potentially? I don't know. You guys let me know what you think about some of these picks, and if there's anyone we haven't mentioned in today's midfielders tier list video, let me know. And of course, guys, if you did enjoy this one, make sure you drop a like, do subscribe, and we might do a defenders one. Depends how well this video does, because the forwards one didn't do so great. If this gets 1,000 likes, we'll drop a defenders video. If not, no problem. We'll leave the tier lists for the time being. But appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much, and I will see you on the next one, which will be dropping tomorrow. See you later, mates. Bye bye.